What if the oldest words humanity ever pressed into the world were not meant to announce a beginning, but to cradle a memory? Tonight, let your shoulders loosen. Let the room around you become quieter. If there is a distant sound traffic, a fan, a neighbor's life moving gently on, let it be part of the story, the way wind becomes part of a desert. In your mind, we are far from screens and schedules. We are in the south of Iraq, where the land lies open and flat, and the horizon shimmers as if it is breathing. In the hour we are visiting, late, blue, unhurried, the desert feels like a soft, ancient ocean, and the air carries dust the way the sea carries salt. Imagine that dust for a moment. Not as something dirty, but as something patient. Dust is what time becomes when it has nowhere else to go. Dust settles into cracks. Dust rests on stone. Dust drifts over ruins the way a blanket drifts over a sleeping child. And under that dust, there are cities that once listened to the same night sky you do. Names that sound like stones warmed by sun. Eridu, Uruk, Nippur. Their walls are low now, their streets are buried, but their quiet remains, and in that quiet, there is a peculiar invitation, an invitation to slow down, to stop trying to solve the world, and simply let it be wide. Now, with your breath steady, imagine a different room, a museum after closing. The last footsteps have faded, the lights are dimmed to a honeyed glow, the air is cool and carefully still. Behind glass, small clay tablets rest like dried leaves, each one holding a library in miniature. You can picture a curator turning a key, a soft click, and then the building settles. The way a house settles at night, the way your own mind can settle when you let it. In that stillness, it is easy to imagine the tablets as if they are breathing. Not literally, of course, but in the way certain objects feel alive when you look at them with gentleness. Clay remembers touch. Clay holds the pressure of fingertips. Clay keeps the angle of a reed stylus. And when you lean close enough to see the tiny wedge-shaped impressions, you begin to feel how near the ancient hands still are. Cuneiform, wedge marks, pressed rather than drawn, like bird tracks in mud. 5,000 years is a long time. Long enough for empires to rise and vanish. Long enough for languages to bloom, to fall quiet. And yet, these marks remain. Tonight, our story will not rush. It will move the way a slow river moves through reeds. It will offer you gentle images, a few soft facts, and a warmth that asks nothing of you but presence. Before we drift deeper into tonight's gentle journey, remember to subscribe to Ancient Sleep Story. Here, you'll always find peaceful stories that soothe the heart and quiet the mind. Where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment. Your presence adds warmth to this quiet corner of the night. Now, we can continue. If you're listening in bed, let your eyelids soften. If you're elsewhere, let your breath slow. In the late 19th century, archaeologists began to dig into the southern plains of Mesopotamia. They came with notebooks and brushes, with the kind of curiosity that feels like holding a lantern in a dark room. They expected to find beginnings, simple scratches, awkward attempts, the first slow steps of writing. But what they found, again and again, were tablets that did not feel like first steps. They felt like a civilization already walking. Records of trade, yes, grain, sheep, barley, the gentle inventory of daily life. But also law, hymn, medicine, and a careful attention to the sky. City plans that show intention. Canals cut like quiet lines through earth. Temples rebuilt on the same sacred footprint, layer upon layer, as if each generation wanted to stand exactly where the one before had stood and look up at the same stars. History often comforts us with a simple rhythm. Trial, error, improvement, a slow climb from less to more. Yet here, in the earliest layers, there is a different feeling. Not invention, but remembrance. There is a word that will return in our story like a soft bell. Restoration. A few tablets, in their formal, patient language, speak as if what is being built is not entirely new. more like a careful return to something once known. Not a triumphant march forward, but a quiet reconstruction after forgetting. And that is the tender mystery at the heart of tonight. If these people were restoring what had been lost, as you breathe in, imagine holding one tablet in your hands. Clay is heavier than you expect, warm if it has just been pressed and dried in sun, smooth in some places, textured in others. The wedges catch light like tiny shadows. Sometimes this is one of the most human things. There are fingerprints, a thumb pressed too long, a ridge of skin made permanent, a moment of comfort, or simply the softness of being alive, preserved in mud. If you ever feel alone, remember this. 5,000 years ago, someone's hand was tired too. Someone paused, adjusted their grip, and left a mark. The past is not only kings and temples, it is ordinary hands, doing careful work, trying to keep something safe. Before you drift further into sleep, what do you want to retain? An image, a word, or a feeling of peace? For now, you don't need an answer. Just let the question float like a small paper boat on dark water, because soon we will follow these tablets beyond the museum glass, back to the river plains, back to a line of text that divides history in two. A line so short it feels like a breath. And after it, everything changes. The museum is quieter now. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that feels cared for, like a room that has been gently put to bed. Somewhere in the building, a soft system hums, keeping the air steady, protecting paper and clay from heat and damp. The halls are dim. The polished floor holds small pools of amber light beneath the lamps, and every shadow looks calm, as if it has been waiting patiently for night. If you want, take a slow breath in and let it go, as if you're setting something down. In the archive, deeper than the public galleries, behind a door that closes with a quiet, respectful click, shelves rise like cliffs made of cardboard and wood. Boxes are stacked with careful handwriting on their sides. Drawers slide like calm tides. Labels, numbers, dates, places, each one a small anchor, holding a fragment of the past in its correct, gentle place. The clay tablets rest here the way stones rest at the bottom of a river. They do not compete, they simply remain. Sometimes, when you stand here long enough, you notice a faint scent, old paper, wood, and a hint of dust that never quite settles. It isn't unpleasant. It's comforting, like the smell of a book you loved years ago, still waiting in the dark for a return. Some are small enough to fit in your palm. Some are larger, shaped like hand-sized bricks with softened edges. Their surfaces carry a quiet geography, tiny wedges pressed in neat lines, some sharp, some softened by time, all arranged with patient confidence. Imagine holding one, cool at first, then warming where your skin touches it. Clay meets you halfway. It is firm, but it remembers softness. It is solid, but it was once wet enough to accept a thought. On a long table, under a low lamp, a tray waits. A soft brush, a folded cloth, a thin pencil. Nothing dramatic, just the quiet tools of care. And beside them, a tablet. The marks come into focus. The stylus did not draw curves. It pressed angles. A wedge, another wedge, a cluster like a small constellation. And in the spaces between the rows, you can feel the rhythm of a human hand: press, lift, shift, press, lift, shift, steady as breathing. We often imagine ancient history as stone and thunder, but writing begins in something gentler. Mud, reed, a lapful of wet clay held close to the body, warm from sun and from the person shaping it. An ordinary hand choosing to make an ordinary moment last. If you listen closely, just in your mind, you can almost hear it, the soft tack of reed against clay. Not a scratch, not a scrape, more like footsteps on damp sand. Outside this building, the modern world continues. Phones glow, messages arrive. But here, none of that is urgent. Here, time does something else. It stretches. It settles. it becomes wide enough for you to rest inside it. And in that wideness, a quiet comfort appears. There have always been people carrying lists and worries and hopes, then setting them down for a moment, the way you are setting yours down now. In the late 19th century, when many of these tablets were first lifted from the southern plains of Mesopotamia, they arrived like sleep-warm stones from a far riverbed. They were taken from soil layered over centuries, silt, sand, ash, broken brick, each layer a page the earth had turned slowly. Some tablets were found whole, many were broken, scattered like pieces of a quiet bowl, and for years, people sat under lamplight and tried to fit fragments together, not to win an argument, just to understand, to let the past speak in its own steady tone. Imagine one of those scholars for a moment, not as a dramatic figure, but as a person with tired eyes and gentle patience. Someone who warms tea, keeps the room calm, turns a fragment over, studies the angles, and waits for recognition the way you wait for sleep. There is tenderness in that kind of work, a belief that even broken things deserve to be listened to. Some tablets read like daily life. How many jars of oil? How many measures of barley? How many sheep moved from one pen to another? Simple records. The heartbeat of a city. But there are others too. Tablets that carry myths in formal, quiet language. Tablets that name kings. Tablets that trace canals and temple grounds. Tablets that hold prayers that sound, even now, like someone whispering into a night wind. And it is here among the calm order of the archive that we begin to sense the seed of tonight's mystery. Because a few texts speak as if the world has already been lost once. Not with panic, not with fear. With the calm tone of someone closing one book and beginning another, they hint at a before close enough to touch and yet distant enough to shimmer. Often, that hint arrives as a simple pattern. A name, a number, a name, a number. The slow cadence of a list. Your mind does not need to calculate, it only needs to float. And in the middle of the list, there is a pause so gentle, it can almost be missed. A short line. A soft division. The kind of sentence that doesn't shout, but changes the air in the room. Tonight, we will come to that line together. For now, imagine an archivist sliding open a drawer, smooth, silent rails, revealing a tablet wrapped in pale tissue, like something fragile and cherished. A small tag rests beside it, with a handwritten note that simply says, Kings and the Flood. The lamp's light falls across the clay. The wedges darken, then brighten, then darken again as your gaze moves. And your breath, still slow, recognizes the shape of waiting. Because the next thing we read will not feel like a beginning. It will feel like a memory returning. Let the museum draw close again, softly, as if the building itself is exhaling. And now, without hurrying, let your mind travel back through the long corridor of time, back through doors that open not with hinges, but with imagination. Picture the southern plains of Mesopotamia at night. The land is low and wide. The sky feels close in its vastness, like a deep bowl turned upside down above the earth. A thin wind moves across the open ground and gathers dust into slow, drifting veils. Somewhere far away, a dog barks once and then falls quiet, as if even that sound remembers to be gentle, and then you hear it. Water, not the loud water of storms, but the steady water of rivers and canals, a quiet sliding sound, a soft pull, the kind of sound your mind can rest inside. The Euphrates and the Tigris are the great names, but the life of the cities is in the smaller veins, channels cut by careful hands, lined with reeds, carrying water like a calm promise through fields and gardens. If you want, take another slow breath in, and let the exhale feel long, like a river lengthening into the dark. We are not walking fast, we are drifting. Imagine a small boat, simple wood, low to the water, moving without urgency. The surface is dark, but it holds reflections, a thin silver path from the moon, a trembling scatter of stars, a lantern glow from a distant bank. Along the shore, silhouettes of mud brick walls rise softly, not sharp, not threatening, just present. Cool clay, corners that have held shade through many summers. This is Ur, or Uruk, or Eridu, where some stories place the first city, as if the idea of home began beside water. A ziggurat rises ahead terraced steps, broad and patient, climbing into moonlight. It does not feel like power in this hour. It feels like a shape made for listening. A place where wind can pass through, where prayer can be carried upward without effort, and below it there are lamps, soft flames sheltered by hands, warm circles of light on packed earth. Inside one of those circles, someone is writing. Not a king, not a hero, a scribe. You can picture him seated on a low stool, shoulders relaxed, the day's heat finally gone from the air. On a small board lies a tablet of clay, flattened while it is still willing to be shaped. His stylus is a reed cut to a clean angle. He presses it into the clay with the same calm rhythm you have heard in your own breath. Press, lift, shift, press, lift, shift. The wedges appear, line after line. Sometimes the text is about barley. Sometimes it is about a delivery of wool. Sometimes it is a hymn, a story, a memory given structure so it can travel beyond one lifetime. There is a quiet beauty in this, the ancient world saving its thoughts the way you save a photograph, the way you save a letter, the way you save a feeling you do not want to lose. If you have ever wished you could keep a calm moment forever, you understand this impulse exactly. Outside, night deepens. The canals keep moving. Somewhere, a temple singer rehearses a line, then lets it fade. A child laughs once, far off, and then the sound dissolves into the dark. Above the city, the sky opens wider. The constellations that will later be called Scorpio and Leo and Taurus are already there, though the names are different in the mouth of time. Still, the shapes are familiar. A curve of stars like a hooked tail, a cluster like a lion's shoulders, a bright point like an eye watching kindly from the heavens. It is comforting to know that the same stars have always been there, that no matter how busy the day has been, the sky continues its slow, generous pattern. Tonight, let those stars become a blanket. Let them cover the sharp edges of your thoughts. And as you drift beneath them, notice something else the scribes understood. Time does not only move forward, it also settles downward. Rivers flood and retreat, leaving silt. Winds carry dust and lay it gently on rooftops. Mud brick melts back into earth when walls are abandoned. A courtyard becomes a mound becomes a hill becomes a quiet place where no one remembers the names of the streets beneath. Civilization, here, is layered one life on top of another life, like sheets folded over a bed. So when we say we are going back, we are also going down through the soft pages of soil, down through silt that once floated in floodwater, down through ash from cooking fires that warmed ordinary evenings, down toward tablets sleeping in the dark. There is a calmness to this idea that the earth keeps memory the way the mind does, not perfectly, but patiently. Centuries later, archaeologists will stand on these mounds and dig carefully, as if they are waking someone without startling them, layer by layer. And when they reach the tablets, they will lift them into light, the way you might lift a sleeping child's blanket to see their face. In one hand, a piece of clay. In the other, a question. What did these people know? What did they remember? And why do some of their records sound less like invention and more like restoration? Tonight, our boat keeps drifting. The water makes a soft sound against wood. Reeds whisper on the bank. The ziggurat holds the moon like a quiet stairway. And somewhere ahead, close now, close enough to feel the slow list of kings is waiting. A cadence, a lullaby of names and years, each syllable falling like sand, each pause softening the mind further. And then, in the middle of it, a line that divides the world as gently as a breath. Then the flood swept over. The drawer opens again in your imagination, and the museum air meets you like cool water. A lamp leans over the table. Its light is warm, but not bright enough to feel harsh. It makes a small circle of gold on the wood. and inside that circle a tablet waits quiet, unhurried, as if it has all night. You don't need to read quickly. In fact, it is better if you don't. Cuneiform is a script that rewards slowness. Each wedge is a tiny decision, a tiny footprint, and when the wedges gather into words, the words gather into a rhythm. Tonight, we let that rhythm do what it was always meant to do: carry the mind gently, like a boat on dark water. The text is known today as the Sumerian King List. That name sounds formal, like a label on a museum shelf. But the feeling of it is simpler: a long recitation of rulers, cities, and years spoken in the quiet tone of someone keeping a record by lamplight. A name, and then a span of time. Another name, another span of time. The mind begins to soften, not because it is solving anything, but because it is listening to repetition, like waves, like rain, like your own breath arriving and leaving, arriving and leaving. Some of the rains are the length you would expect years that feel human, measurable, lived. And then, gently, the list becomes strange. Not frightening, not dramatic, just quietly different, the way a dream can be different while still feeling safe. A king reigns for a number so large it feels like starlight rather than calendar time. Another reign stretches even longer, as if time itself has slowed to a near standstill. You don't have to calculate. You can let the numbers be like distant bells. They are part of an older way of speaking about deep time, about a world that feels farther away than distance, a world that feels like the bottom of a lake where light barely reaches. The tablet keeps its calm. It does not argue. It does not explain. It simply says, in its steady voice, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And then, in the middle of the cadence, the line appears. So short it is almost weightless. Then the flood swept over. That is all. No thunder in the sentence, no warning, no detail. Just a quiet dividing line, like a breath taken between two pages. Before it, names that stretch into the unreal. After it, kings that feel closer to ordinary years, closer to the kind of time a human body understands. It is tempting to treat the line like a door and rush through it. But tonight we approach it the way you approach sleep, slowly, with trust. A flood, in this land, is not an abstract idea. Rivers here are generous, but they can also be overwhelming. When rain falls far upstream and the channels swell, water spreads across the plains and leaves behind silt, a smooth skin of mud that dries into silence. Even today, you can stand near these rivers and feel how flat the world is, how easily water can take it. So the line on the tablet may have been memory, or myth, or both, braided together the way reeds braid into a basket. If you have ever carried a family story, something you heard as a child and kept, even as the details blurred, you understand how truth and meaning can travel together without needing to be pinned down like an insect. In the early 20th century, archaeologists dug into the mounds at the ancient city of Uruk, close to the old river paths. Among them was Leonard Woolley, who worked with patient care, lowering his team through layers of debris the way a diver lowers through water. At a certain depth, he found something that made him pause. A thick deposit of clean silt mud laid down by water, not by human hands. Above it, signs of habitation again, the return of walls and objects and daily life. Below it, older layers, older life. Woolley believed he was seeing evidence of a great flood, a moment when the river had claimed the city, and then, much later, released it back to human hands. Later scholars would debate how wide such a flood could have been, how much it can explain, how many times rivers have done this quiet, destructive work. That debate belongs to daylight. In the night, the gentler truth is enough. This land remembers water, and it remembers loss, and it remembers rebuilding, because what comes after a flood is not only ruin, it is restoration. Mud dries, bricks are made again. A corner is rebuilt where a corner once stood. A canal is cleared, a lamp is lit. A hand returns to the clay, presses the stylus down, and begins to write. And perhaps that is why these earliest texts do not always feel like beginnings. They feel like someone picking up a thread that was dropped, like someone finding a melody that was almost forgotten, like someone rebuilding a home with the memory of an older home still warm in the mind. If tonight's story reminds you of a beautiful memory, you can hold it quietly for yourself, the way the earth holds a fingerprint. For now, stay with the line. Let your breathing match the river. Then, the flood swept over. Imagine it not as chaos, but as a slow, unstoppable rise. Water entering streets, lanterns going out one by one, voices becoming distant. And then, after the long patience of drying and silence, footsteps again on firm ground. In the next part, we will follow that thin seam of silt like a pale ribbon through the earth, and we will listen for what the layers are trying to tell us about the softness of forgetting and the tenderness of remembering. The seam of silt is lighter than the layers above it, almost clean, as if the earth paused and laid down a sheet. In the daylight, an archaeologist would call it a deposit, a stratum, a flood layer. In the night, you can imagine it as a quiet ribbon stretched through the mound like a soft line in a dream. If you want, picture the excavation at Uruk not as a busy work site, but as a slow descent. The morning air is mild, the sun is not sharp yet, brushes move gently, buckets pass from hand to hand without urgency. Each motion is careful, as if everyone has agreed to speak in whispers, so the past won't be startled awake. Down they go, through broken brick that once held walls, through ash that once floated above cooking fires, through pottery shards that used to be bowls warmed by bread. And then the color changes. A pale, fine mud appears, smooth and quiet. It has no fingerprints, no straw, no brick dust. It is not the texture of human life. It is the texture of water doing its patient work. Above this ribbon, the city returns objects, floors, the familiar messiness of living. Below it, another city waits, older, deeper, softer in the mind. It is not necessary to decide tonight how far the flood reached, or whether one river's violence could become the myth of the whole world. Those questions belong to awake hours, when the mind is bright and sharp. Here, in the gentle hour, it is enough to feel what the layer suggests. Something happened, something rose, something covered the streets in quiet. Think of the water as a slow visitor, not an enemy. First, a dampness at the threshold, then a hush in the alleyways, then a reflective skin across courtyards where lamps used to glow. Fish would slip through places that once held footsteps. When the water finally lowered, it would leave behind a thin, pale film, cool, smooth, and strangely even like a page laid down between two chapters. And then, after time had done its slow drying, life began again. If you listen closely, you might notice how comforting that is. Not the flood itself, but what follows. Because human beings are not only builders, we are also returners. We come back to places. We come back to ourselves. We come back to a calmer breath after a day that pulled us too fast. The Sumerian King List does not linger on the flood. It does not describe panic or loss. It does something strangely soothing. It marks the boundary, and then it continues. A name, a reign, a city, a new beginning that feels like an old continuation. In that steady continuation, there is a hint of something the ancients may have known about the mind. If you keep speaking gently, even after a great change, you remind yourself that the world still holds shape. Imagine the scribes after the waters withdrew. The air would smell of wet earth. The ground would be heavy. Reeds would bend under drops of water. The river would move as if nothing had happened, sliding on, shining under the same stars. Someone would walk through the quiet streets, stepping around softened brick, touching a doorway that no longer has a house attached to it. And then, somewhere, a hand would begin again. Clay would be gathered, kneaded, smoothed. A tablet would be pressed flat. A reed stylus would find its angle, and the first wedge would appear, the way the first candle appears in a dark room. Sometimes the most powerful human skill is not invention, it is restoration. To restore is to believe that what was beautiful can return, even if it returns differently. To restore is to carry a memory with warmth rather than with pain. To restore is to rebuild without rushing, to place one brick, then another, then breathe. If you have ever healed from something quietly, slowly, you already understand this ancient rhythm. Your mind may not call it history, but your body remembers the same pattern: overwhelm, retreat, drying, return. And perhaps that is why this story is so gentle for busy modern hearts. The people of the river plains knew that change can be enormous, and still life can become steady again. Now, let your attention drift to the ziggurat. In the daytime, it can look like power, like ambition made of mud brick, but at night, it looks different. It looks like a monument to absence, a shape pointing upward, not only to gods, but to what is no longer there: the lost rooms, the vanished songs, the names spoken once and then forgotten. And yet the monument remains, not to make you anxious, but to offer you a soft truth. Loss is part of time, but so is care. We do not have to hold everything. We only have to hold what is kind. If your thoughts feel crowded tonight, imagine placing them on the steps of that ziggurat, one by one, like small stones set down gently. Let the wind take what it can. Let the moonlight soften the rest. Here, no one rests alone. Every story from the past is a soft lantern in the dark, gently lighting our way tonight. And now, we return to the museum for a moment. Picture the tablet again under warm lamplight. The wedges are small, but they carry a vastness. The idea that memory can be pressed into earth, carried through flood and silence, then lifted back into the hands of the living. Before you drift further, notice your breath, in and out, like the river, in and out, like the long patience of silt settling to the bottom of water. In the next part, we will step even deeper into the gentle mystery, not to chase drama, but to listen for a quieter question. If the flood marked a boundary, what did the scribes believe existed on the other side of it, in the soft before? Stay with the river for a moment longer. Not the river as a map line, not the river as a fact, but the river as a living sound, soft, steady, repeating. In the night, it becomes a kind of lullaby. It tells you the same thing again and again, until the mind stops trying to hurry ahead. In ancient Mesopotamia, water was both gift and boundary. Canals made fields green. Reeds rose in the shallows like quiet music. Boats moved through darkness with lanterns low, their reflections trembling like little moons. And sometimes, water rose too high. When we hear the word flood, the modern mind can tighten, as if bracing for drama. But the old texts often speak of it with a calmer voice, the way you might speak about seasons, something that comes, something that passes, something that leaves a mark. A flood is a line the earth can draw without ink. Above it, a familiar world. Below it, a softer world, older, quieter, like a dream you almost remember when you wake. That is why the phrase on the King List feels so gentle and so powerful. Then the flood swept over. It does not shout, it does not describe terror, it simply places a seam in time. And once you notice that seam, you begin to see how many Mesopotamian stories gather around the same idea, a before and an after. There are flood tales in the region that later generations copied and recopied because what survives is often what is repeated with care. You might have heard of the flood in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the memory is passed on in a quiet conversation, as if the past itself has taken a human shape and is speaking softly by lamplight. You might have heard of Atrahasis, a story that moves like a long breath through weariness and relief. And there is an older Sumerian flood tale, sometimes associated with the city of Eridu, where a figure like Ziusudra listens, prepares, and survives, less like a blockbuster, more like a quiet memory carried forward. Tonight, you don't need to hold these names tightly. Let them float past like reeds on the surface. What matters is the feeling they share, the sense that civilization is not only built once, but built again, restored after a great washing away. Imagine a scribe in a later city, long after the waters have retreated, copying an older story onto fresh clay. He is not panicking, he is not warning, he is preserving. The tablet in front of him is damp and cool. The stylus is light in his hand. Outside, the streets are ordinary again. Vendors in the morning, children at noon, lamps at night. The world is steady. Yet the story he copies speaks of a boundary of water that once rose and changed the shape of life. Why keep such a story? Not to frighten the listener, but to remind the listener that endings can be followed by continuations. That even when the world changes, people return to make bread, to plant seeds, to sing, to write, to care for one another. If you have lived long enough to see a chapter close an old job, an old neighborhood, an old season of life, you understand why a calm reminder like this can feel healing. It says, "You are not strange for needing time. You are not weak for rebuilding slowly. The world has always been remade in quiet ways." And there is another gentle possibility, one that sits beneath all these flood stories like silt beneath water. Sometimes a flood is not only about water. Sometimes it is the mind's way of speaking about forgetting, about the way memories can be covered, not destroyed, just covered, protected by layers, until the moment comes when they can be lifted again into light. Think of the tablets sleeping in the earth for thousands of years. Think of the fingerprints in the clay, pressed once, then hidden under dust and silence, then found again by careful hands. It is a patient cycle. Press, bury, wait, recover. Civilization, in this sense, is a kind of remembering, and the phrase restoration of what was before begins to feel less like a puzzle and more like a soft truth, because people do restore. They restore songs, they restore rituals, they restore stories that help them feel steady in the dark. You can even feel it in the way cities were rebuilt in the same places, along the same waterways, as if location itself carried memory. A temple footprint becomes sacred not only because of gods, but because of repetition, because generations return to the same ground and say, quietly, "We are still here." Now, let the scene widen. We are on a canal at night. The water is dark, the air is cool. A few insects drift near the lantern light. Reeds make small sounds when the wind turns. And above it all, the sky spreads out, indifferent and kind. On the bank, the ziggurat rises like a calm stairway. Its steps catch moonlight. Its shadow falls softly across the ground, not threatening, just present, the way an old memory can be present. And somewhere, in a room made of mud brick, a tablet dries. As it dries, the clay hardens around words that will outlast the person who wrote them. If you want, let that idea soothe you, that what is gentle can last, that quiet care can travel across time, that your own small efforts, your small restorations are part of something ancient and human. Take one more breath in, slow and comfortable. And on the exhale, imagine the floodline again, not as fear, but as a seam of pale silt, separating chapters. In the next part, we will drift even closer to the mystery of the before, not to prove anything, but to listen. What kind of world do these tablets seem to be reaching for when they speak so softly of restoration? Imagine we step down one more layer, not with ladders or tools, but with attention. The world above us, traffic, deadlines, glowing screens, stays where it is, safely far away, like a city seen from an airplane at night. Down here, the air is cooler, the colors are softer, the sounds are fewer. It is the kind of place your mind can rest without needing to guard itself. Beneath the pale ribbon of silt, the earth holds a different chapter. Older floors, older pottery, older ash from older fires. It is not a dramatic difference. It is more like the difference between two dreams. Both are quiet, but one feels farther away, as if it is made of deeper blue. Archaeologists, when they reach these layers, do not announce them like discoveries in movies. They pause, they brush more gently, they speak in lowered voices, because everything here is fragile, in a special way. Fragile not because it will break, but because it will disappear if you hurry. Tonight, we can picture the before, the way the tablets invite us to picture it, as a memory held in clay, shaped by longing, softened by time. The oldest city in some traditions is Eridu, a name that feels like wind moving over water. Eridu sits near the marshes, where reeds sway and birds pass low across the surface, and where freshwater pools gather like dark mirrors under the stars. In the old imagination, there is even a name for the deep, hidden freshwater beneath the earth, the Abzu, a quiet, unseen ocean that feeds the rivers from below. You don't need to treat that as literal. You can treat it as poetry, the way the ancients often did, a way of saying that calm comes from deep places and that life can be replenished when it has a source beneath the noise. So, picture Eridu at night. A low skyline of mud brick homes, doorways hung with woven mats, a canal moving slowly past, carrying the night's coolness through the streets. A few lamps glow behind thin walls, turning clay into honey color. Somewhere, someone stirs a pot, and the scent of grain rises and fades, gentle as breath. And above it all, the sky. The stars are steady. They do not rush. They do not demand. They simply shine, and in their slow shining, they remind the mind how to loosen its grip. If you like, let your shoulders soften again as you imagine those stars. Let your jaw unclench. Let your hands rest where they are. Nothing is required of you in this hour. The before, in the King List, and in the old stories, can feel impossibly long. Kings reign for spans that stretch beyond the scale of a human life. Cities sound as if they have always existed. It is not meant to be a spreadsheet. It is meant to be a mood, deep time, where beginnings blur into something older than memory. And yet, even in that deep time, the tablets keep returning to ordinary details. A temple rebuilt, a canal cleared, a line of text copied carefully, a hand pressing wedges into clay. This is where the soft twist begins to form, not as a shock, but as a gentle reframe. The mystery may not be what supernatural thing happened. The mystery may be, how did humans keep going and keep remembering when the world changed? Because the before is not only about what existed, it is also about how it was carried forward. Think of the act of copying. A scribe in a later century sits in lamplight, listening to an older man recite a text, or reading from a tablet that has already survived 100 years. He presses the same words into fresh clay, not to show off, not to argue, but to keep the thread unbroken. There is something deeply soothing about that. When your own days feel fragmented, the idea of a thread carefully held, carefully passed, can calm the nervous system in a way logic never does. If you could step into one quiet place in this ancient city, where would you go? Would you sit beside the canal and watch the moon's reflection tremble on the surface? Would you stand at the base of a ziggurat and feel the stone-cool shadow across your skin? Would you slip into a small courtyard where a fig tree breathes slowly in the night air? You don't need to answer out loud. Just let one image come and let it stay. Because images, more than facts, are what the mind carries into sleep. Now, return again to the floodline, not as catastrophe, but as transition. Water rises, water covers, water leaves silt. And then, after a long quiet, someone returns to the same ground, to the same sky, to the same need for meaning. This is restoration. Not a perfect reconstruction, but a gentle continuation. A way of saying, we are still here, and we remember enough to begin again. And perhaps that is why the earliest records feel like they are reaching backward as much as forward. They are not only inventing a world, they are recovering it, piecing it together from the fragments time allowed to remain. In that hush, even the oldest tablets seem to say, slow down, breathe, and let time hold you safely. In a way, your own mind does something similar when you lie down at night. It gathers scattered moments, it smooths rough edges, it lets some things sink like silt, and keeps a few quiet impressions close like fingerprints in clay. So as we drift toward the next part of the story, let your thoughts do that gentle work. Let the day settle, let what is heavy sink, let what is kind remain. Because soon, under the same stars that watched Eridu, we will reach a calm, luminous understanding. The past is not only behind you, it is beside you, quietly restoring you, one soft breath at a time. The night keeps its steady pace. Somewhere in the world outside this story, a clock changes its number, a streetlight hums, a screen dims, but here, in this quieter pocket of time, you can move as slowly as you need. Return once more to the archive after closing. The lamp is still on, the circle of light is still warm, and the tablet, small, unassuming, patient, rests as if it has been waiting for your breath to match it. If you imagine leaning closer, you might notice something that isn't language at all. A smudge, a faint ridge, a fingerprint. Not always clear, not always dramatic, just the soft evidence that someone held this clay while it was still alive with moisture and possibility. 5,000 years collapse into the simplest human fact. A hand was here. Tonight, let that be the turning point. Not a revelation meant to shock you awake, but a soft discovery meant to ease you deeper into rest. Because the biggest mystery in these ancient records may not be the flood itself. It may be the tenderness of continuity. We tend to imagine the past as a line. First, nothing. Then, suddenly, the first city, the first writing, the first law. But when you sit with the tablets long enough, when you let them speak in their own slow rhythm, you begin to feel a different shape. Not a sharp beginning, a return, a restoration. In some of the earliest layers, the cities appear already knowing how to be cities. Streets align, walls are measured, canals run like calm sentences across the earth. Temples rise not as experiments, but as patterns repeated with care. Even the writing, these wedges pressed into clay, arrives with a steadiness that feels practiced. And that steadiness whispers a gentle question into the night. What came before the part we can see? Not necessarily a lost super-civilization, not a secret meant to spark arguments, not anything that needs you to tighten your mind, just something simpler, and perhaps more human. Earlier attempts, earlier memories, earlier ways of arranging life that did not survive as clearly as the clay did. Because memory is selective. The earth keeps some things and lets other things blur. The mind does the same. If you've ever tried to remember your childhood, you know this pattern well. You can recall a kitchen light, a certain smell of rain, the sound of a parent's voice in another room, but whole years can feel like fog, not gone, just softened. The tablets feel like that too. They carry bright points of detail, surrounded by haze. And in that haze, the concept of restoration of what was before becomes less like a puzzle and more like a lullaby. It says, the world has always been made, unmade, and made again. The thread breaks, and then someone ties it gently back together. Imagine, for a moment, a scribal school in a Sumerian city. It is morning, light spills into a courtyard, the air smells faintly of damp clay and warm bread. Young apprentices sit with small practice tablets, pressing the same wedge over and over, learning the angles the way a musician learns scales. Their teacher does not shout. He taps the clay, points, corrects. Patient repetition, calm discipline, the kind of learning that becomes soothing when you stop resisting it. Some practice tablets are simple, lists of words, lists of signs, lists of numbers. Not exciting, not dramatic, just the quiet machinery of a society keeping itself organized. And yet, there's something comforting in the ordinariness. It reminds you that the past was full of mornings too, full of small tasks, full of people trying to do their work well. And maybe that is why the great stories of floods and kings do not feel frightening here. They are surrounded by the gentle hum of daily life. For every epic line, there are thousands of lines about barley and wool, and dates proof that even in deep time, people woke up, ate, worked, and hoped for a peaceful night. Now, let the lamp in the archive brighten slightly in your imagination, not in intensity, but in meaning. Because under this warm light, the tablets show you something simple and healing. A civilization is not only monuments and disasters, it is continuity, hands teaching hands, words copying words, care passing forward. And in that continuity, the flood line on the king list becomes even softer. Then the flood swept over. A boundary, yes. A seam of pale silt through the earth, yes. But also a reminder, after boundaries, life returns to its rhythm. A canal is cleared again. A reed is cut again. A stylus presses again. A fingerprint appears again, almost without noticing. This is how time moves when you stop forcing it to be dramatic. It moves like water, and it leaves behind quiet evidence of touch. If you want to, take a slow breath in, and as you breathe out, imagine your own worries becoming silt, settling gently to the bottom of the mind, not fought, not chased, simply allowed to rest. Because what you are listening to tonight is not only history, it is a pattern of resilience so calm it can lull you towards sleep. In the next part, we will step to the top of the ziggurat under the open sky, not to conquer anything, but to look outward toward the stars, toward the river, toward the long arc of time, and feel the soft expansion of meaning that comes when you realize you are part of the same gentle continuity. If this story has brought you even a small pocket of calm, you can leave a gentle comment for yourself, just a word, or a place, or a quiet feeling you want to keep. Somewhere above the archive roof, the same constellations hang in quiet order: Scorpion, Lion, Bull, like a slow-moving canopy. They do not hurry you. They only remind you the night is wide enough for rest. And for now, let the lamp continue to glow, and let the ancient fingerprints remain where they have always been, pressed into clay, held by time, waiting softly in the dark. The ziggurat is waiting, not like a challenge, not like a monument demanding attention, but like a quiet shape in the dark that has always belonged to the night. From the canal, it rises in gentle tiers, each step broad enough to hold a pause, each level wide enough for breath. Mud brick, warmed by days long gone, now holds a coolness that feels steady beneath your feet. If you want, imagine climbing slowly, not with effort, but with the soft patience of someone walking upstairs in a sleeping house. One step, then another, and between them, a moment of balance. The city below does not disappear. It simply becomes quieter, as if distance itself is turning down the volume. With every step, the air changes. It grows cleaner, more open. The scent of damp reeds fades. A faint trace of smoke from cooking fires becomes a memory. And the wind, higher here, moves across your skin like a cool hand, reminding you to unclench. At the top, you stop. No trumpet, no speech, only sky. Above you, the stars are arranged with a calm certainty. They do not rush to become anything else. They do not argue about meaning. They shine, and in their shining, they offer the simplest kind of companionship, a presence that does not ask you to perform. The river is a dark line in the distance, carrying moonlight in fragments. The canals, smaller and quieter, glimmer like thin threads sewn into the earth. And the city Uruk, Eridu, whichever name your mind chooses tonight, rests with its roofs low and its lamps small, like fireflies in a wide field. Here, it becomes easier to feel the thing the tablets have been whispering all along. That time is not only a straight road, time is a circle of returns. People come and go, but the gestures repeat. Water carried in jars, bread broken by hand, a child's head tucked under a blanket, a reed stylus pressed into clay. Even the stories repeat, not as copies made dull by repetition, but as lamps passed from one palm to another. And when you remember that, the twist in the King List turns gentle, almost tender. If the earliest records sound like restoration, perhaps it is because restoration is the oldest human talent. Long before we built tall walls, we learned how to come back. Long before we wrote laws, we learned how to mend. Long before we argued about beginnings, we learned how to gather the pieces after a hard season and place them down again in a kinder order. If your own life has had seasons like that, times when you rebuilt quietly, then you are standing on this ziggurat too, in your own way. Not above anyone, not separate, just paused in a higher, clearer air, looking at the long landscape of what you have carried. Breathe in, let the breath feel like the night widening. And as you breathe out, let the day soften behind you, as if it is a city settling into sleep. The ancients watched this same sky. They did not know our calendars, our clocks, our crowded notifications. but they knew the feeling you may know right now, the relief of looking up and realizing the universe is not in a hurry. They mapped patterns in the stars because patterns soothed the mind. They told stories that stretched far back because deep time makes present worries feel smaller, not by dismissing them, but by placing them gently into a larger frame. On the top of the ziggurat, you can feel that frame. The wind says, you don't have to fix everything tonight. The stars say, you are allowed to rest. The river says, even what feels heavy can settle and become calm. Now imagine below the ziggurat a temple room where tablets are stored. Some are new, still drying, their edges sharp. Some are old, their corners softened, their surfaces smoothed by careful handling. The room is cool, the shelves are simple, and in the dim light, the tablets look like sleeping animals, quiet and warm in their own way. A scribe enters with a lamp. He does not stomp, he does not hurry. He lifts one tablet with two hands, the way you lift something fragile, and he carries it to a low table. He reads slowly. He copies a line onto fresh clay. The wedges appear, dark and clean, like tiny shadows. He is not thinking about fame. He is thinking about continuity. He is thinking about keeping something safe for someone he will never meet. And that is the softest miracle of history. Strangers caring for strangers across time. If tonight's story has felt like a small lantern for you, you can keep it without effort. You can let it sit beside you, quietly, the way a comforting thought sits beside the mind when it stops fighting sleep. Before you drift further, ask yourself, without needing an answer, what do you want to retain? An image, a word, or a feeling of peace? Perhaps you keep the image of moonlight on steps. Perhaps you keep the word restoration. Perhaps you keep the feeling that you are held inside something larger than your to-do list. And if a beautiful memory rises while you listen, one you haven't touched in a while, let it rise softly. Let it be here, without needing to become anything. Let it warm you for a moment, then let it settle, like silt returning to the riverbed. The ziggurat remains under the stars, patient and still, pointing not to power, but to presence. The city below continues its quiet life. The river continues its gentle movement. Somewhere, a door closes, a lamp is lowered, a dog curls into warmth. In the archive, clay holds quiet. In your room, so do you. And you right where you are can begin to feel the same gentle continuation, breath after breath, the mind restoring itself, one calm moment at a time. The night is still wide. If you can, let the image of the ziggurat fade a little, the way a dream fades when it has done its gentle work. Let the steps and the moonlight soften at the edges until they become more like a feeling than a picture. Now, we return slowly, kindly back through the same doors we opened at the beginning. The canal becomes a quiet line, then a memory of water. The reeds become a soft whisper, then only the idea of wind. The ancient city lowers itself into darkness, roofs and courtyards settling like blankets, and the stars remain steady as ever, above everything, above brick, above silt, above centuries watching without needing to intervene. In the museum, after closing, the lamp is still on. The circle of light on the table is smaller now, as if the room is preparing to sleep too. The air is cool. The building holds itself with a patient stillness. Somewhere in a distant hallway, a faint sound, perhaps a system hum, perhaps a settling beam, moves through the quiet and disappears. On the table, the clay tablet rests behind glass. It does not demand to be understood tonight. It does not insist that you solve the flood, or measure the silt, or prove what was before. It simply offers something softer, the knowledge that memory can be held, and that time, though immense, can be gentle. If you imagine looking closely one last time, you might see those wedge marks again, small shadows pressed into earth. And if you imagine turning the tablet slightly beneath the lamp, you might see, near an edge, the faint warmth of a fingerprint, a thumb, a ridge, a tiny imperfection that survived because clay once accepted it and time chose to keep it. That is the quiet lesson I want to leave you with. History is not only the loud moments that make headlines in textbooks. History is also the ordinary touch, the hand that steadies a bowl, the hand that lifts a child, the hand that presses a stylus into wet clay and pauses, just long enough to leave proof of being human. In some evenings, the mind behaves like an excavation. It brushes gently at the surface of the day, finds a small shard of feeling, turns it over, then sets it aside. A regret, a tenderness, a question you didn't finish answering. You don't have to dig deeper tonight. You can let those pieces remain where they are, safe in the soil of your inner world, until a kinder hour. And if you like, offer the past a quiet gratitude, not because everything was easy, but because you made it here. You crossed your own rivers. You endured your own weather. You learned, in ways no one else can measure, how to keep going. That is also a kind of ancient craft, shaping a life, patiently, day by day, the way a scribe shapes a line of wedges, press, lift, shift, until meaning appears. So let your breath be the stylus now. Press nothing hard, leave only a gentle mark, inhale, exhale, and the quiet promise of rest for you. And maybe that is why this story can feel like comfort for a busy, modern mind. Because when you listen to the past at night, you begin to sense that your own life belongs to the same slow continuity. Days come and go. Seasons rise and retreat. Some chapters feel like floods, too much at once, too fast, too wide. And still, after the waters lower, there is the possibility of restoration. Not perfect, not instant, but real. A breath that returns. A room that becomes quiet again. A morning that arrives without demanding anything heroic. A small choice to be kinder to yourself. If you have carried worry today, you don't have to carry it into sleep. Let it settle, the way silt settles to the riverbed slowly, naturally, without force. Let your thoughts sink into a softer place. Let your chest loosen. Let your jaw relax. Let your eyes feel heavy in the most comfortable way. Outside the museum, the desert wind drifts across ancient mounds. It lifts dust, then lays it down again. Somewhere under that dust, more tablets rest, still asleep, still patient, still holding their quiet impressions. And somewhere inside you, the mind is doing something similar. It is storing what matters and letting the rest dissolve. Before you drift further, choose one gentle thing to keep from tonight. An image, a word, or simply a feeling of peace. Perhaps you keep the image of moonlight on warm steps. Perhaps you keep the word restoration. Perhaps you keep the feeling that time is wide enough to hold you. If tonight's story reminded you of a beautiful memory, feel free to share it below, only when you're ready, only if it feels easy. And if you're listening in the dark somewhere, know this: here, no one rests alone. Every listener is another small lantern, and together we make this quiet corner warmer. If this story brought you calm, leave a gentle comment for yourself, just a single word you'd like to meet again tomorrow. And don't forget to subscribe for more peaceful nighttime journeys with ancient sleep story. Now, there is nothing else to do. Let the museum lights dim in your imagination. Let the archive drawers close. Let the tablet return behind glass. Let the desert settle. Let the river continue its slow, steady movement under the stars. And if there was a world before the flood, whether it was a place, a memory, or a dream, let it sleep too. Because you are safe to sleep now. You are allowed to rest. And the night will keep watch, quietly, as it always has.